Hi, everybody, and welcome to our grant writing workshop today. My name is Melinda Verdanier, and I'm the grants coordinator at the South Dakota Humanities Council. And I'm really glad that you're here today, and I hope that we can provide you with some useful information as you think about writing a South Dakota Humanities Council grant application. So the format for today's workshop will be I'll just make a few introductory notes, and then we'll have a 30-minute video presentation about our grants. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So as soon as the video is over, we'll come back together and open up the Zoom for any questions that you may have. At that time, you can unmute. Carolyn has you muted right now, but at that time later, you can unmute and ask the questions yourself. Or if you prefer, feel free to type them in the chat. And Carolyn's with us, and she's going to help with monitoring those questions so that we can be sure to answer them. So I will go ahead and start the video, and we'll see each other again in a little bit. So I will do the screen here. Okay, so is it up there, Carolyn? You can see it?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm going to start it. Welcome to the South Dakota Humanities Council Grant Writing Workshop. The purpose of this presentation is to share information about our council and about our grants. We want to help you understand the application process so that you can submit a strong competitive application. First of all, what is the South Dakota Humanities Council? Well, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, having been founded in 1972. We are an independent, nonprofit organization supported by grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, also known as NEH, and from donations from private donors. We are the only cultural organization in the state whose sole purpose is to deliver humanities programming to the people of South Dakota. Besides providing financial grant support, we offer a variety of educational and literary programs and house the South Dakota Center for the Book. And we always keep our mission at the forefront, which is to celebrate literature, promote civil conversation, and tell the stories that define our state. A question that often comes up is this one: what are the humanities? So we use this definition that comes from the NEH, which is the federal funding source for all of our grants. Humanities are composed of diverse disciplines, and there's a lot to unpack in this definition. So I've highlighted some of the key aspects. I'll give you a moment to look through it, but for future reference, we also have this definition included in our grant guidelines. As you consider your possible project, think about how it connects to the humanities within this definition. One of the primary reasons a grant is not funded is because it is not a humanities-based program. Humanities programming and arts programming can often be confused, but the two really can be incorporated nicely together. For instance, sometimes organizations have discussion programs prior to their arts-based performance events. These humanities discussions help to improve the viewer's understanding of the art performance. As an organization, we know that the humanities help engage, inform, and inspire South Dakotans in ways that broaden understanding of the complex world in which we live. And to help ensure that all South Dakotans share in these benefits, SDHC provides grant funding and resources to develop and implement meaningful humanities programming in communities across our state. We provide grant funding in 3 different categories, with the focus on public discussion events that will engage the general public with a scholar or scholars in dialogue about a humanities topic. Our main discussion grants provide opportunities to engage the public during events such as conferences, festivals, lectures, and invited speaker presentations. These are programs that bring in a speaker for a particular event. Our media grants engage the general public with a scholar or scholars during events related to the creation of a media project. They include many types of media such as films, videos, slide and tape presentations, scripts, radio and television productions, exhibits, photography, and publications such as books or ebooks. Keep in mind that we don't provide funds solely for book publication expenses. A sponsoring organization must be deeply involved and invested in the project. Media grants must include the same public event requirement, and any sponsoring organization receiving one of these grants must sign a media agreement, which is a document that outlines copyright, distribution, credits, and disclaimers. The third category is research. Research grants must be in a humanities field and are generally written by scholars who are researching a specific topic. It may also be an opportunity for applicants to fund their research as they work toward publishing a book. Like all of our grants, these grants also require a public event to share the work. You'll find all of these descriptions listed in our grant guidelines too. Grant amounts and deadlines. We have what we call major grants and mini grants. Major grants are our larger grants that have a specific deadline of February 28th and October 15th of every year, with program dates that coincide with those deadlines. The current funding limit for these grants is $20,000. However, if you have an exceptional program that requires funding above that level, please feel free to contact us. The grants also have some specific programming timelines. As an example, if you submit an application at our February 28th deadline, you're planning a program that will take place after May 1st. If you are applying in October, you are planning a program that will take place after December 1st. We would like our grants to be completed within the current fiscal year, which ends on October 31st. Occasionally, a program will run over into the next fiscal year, but we prefer that we close them within the same year. Keep in mind that while you may request the full $20,000, you do not need to ask for the full amount. We also have what we call mini grants. Our mini grants are smaller and are requests for $2,000 or less. They are reviewed as they come in and are awarded as funding is available. They need to be submitted 4 to 6 weeks before your event so we can send it out for review, and if it is awarded, you have time to get the signed award letter back to us before your event. So who can receive a grant? We grant only to nonprofit organizations and certain tax-exempt groups. We do not grant to individuals. Our grant agreements are between SDHC and the nonprofit sponsoring organization. We also do not allow fiscal sponsors. There must be a sponsoring organization that's making a substantial contribution to the project. Simply providing bookkeeping and related services does not constitute a substantial contribution. The organization also cannot have any currently open grants with us. They need to have an EIN, which is an employer identification number, also known as a federal tax identification number. It's used by the IRS to identify the business entity. And they need to have a UEI. And the UEI is a new requirement. On April 4th, 2022, the entity and identifier used across the federal government changed from the DUNS number to the unique entity ID, and this is generated by sam.gov. It's a 12-character identifier made up of letters and numbers. If your entity currently has a DUNS number and is already registered in sam.gov, you have already been issued a UEI. You can log into SAM with your current login credentials to obtain your UEI. If your entity does not have a DUNS or is not registered in SAM, you will need to request your UEI through sam.gov. A successful request will provide the UEI immediately. Our grants webpage has a link to a document that can guide you through the process. Here's a list of groups that we typically make awards to, and this list is also in our grant guidelines for your future reference. So how do you start? Well, remember, our grants are private. Carolyn, do we have a snafu? Primarily for programming. We don't provide operational money such as salaries, buildings, equipment, or solely for publication purposes. So start with your organizational needs. Not every grant opportunity is suitable for every organization. Depending on your needs and how they fit with our mission, we may be able to provide an opportunity to expand your organizational reach by providing extra funding to do more. Also, does your organization have the staffing and capability to do the grant program justice? Having this ability and being able to articulate it in your application is significant. And finally, keep in mind that because we live and work on the homeland of the people of the Oceti-Sakowin, SDHC strives to acknowledge the stories of our state's indigenous people in all we do. Therefore, we request that if appropriate, your project includes Native experiences, voices, and perspectives. Our SDHC fiscal year runs from November 1st to October 31st. So every year in mid to late summer, we publish our new grant guidelines, which outline the grant requirements for the coming fiscal year. You'll want to be sure to download the grant guidelines since they are very important. Some of the grant requirements are the following. Your plans must include a public discussion event which takes place in South Dakota. And sometimes organizations plan more than one event. Gathering people together in one space is preferable, but depending on health circumstances at the time, Zoom events may be appropriate and are acceptable. Your program must include active participation of at least one humanities scholar. You can have more scholars, but you're required to have at least one. We define a scholar as a person trained in a humanities discipline earning an advanced degree, or an individual who can document their qualified experience in the humanities. And the question does come up sometimes. Does this scholar need to be on the SDHC list of Speaker Bureau scholars? The answer is no, they don't. And sometimes they come from all over the country or even other places in the world. A few more general requirements are that your organization must provide a financial match that is equal to or exceeds the amount requested from SDHC. I would say that generally organizations meet this very easily and exceed the one-to-one minimum. It's important to have this cost share because it shows how the federal funds we provide are being matched by local community support. They are a very important requirement in NEH grant making. Your event should be free and open to the public and with the goal of attracting a diverse audience. And as I noted earlier, media grants will be required to sign a media agreement. Getting started, what is the application like? As is typical with all grant-making organizations, SDHC wants to know about the sponsoring organization and about your project plans. The application will include many questions for you to answer. Some answers may be a paragraph long, and some may take several paragraphs. To help you organize your information, we have provided a grant application template on our grants webpage, which is a working document you can download. This is one of the first things you'll want to do, along with downloading our grant guidelines. Since you'll want to know all of the application questions before you apply, this document provides the data fields and presents the general format of the online grant application. You can use this template to organize your information before completing and submitting the online application. I'll go through the main questions on our application and give a little explanation for each one. Since all of your expenses must occur during your grant period, you'll need to think carefully about what dates you'll put in the application for your project's start and end dates. Think of the timeline for when you will begin your project and when you think it will be complete. The October application deadline is for projects after December 1st, so the start date for these projects will be December 1st. For the February 28th deadline, it will be May 1st. The project end date is the date by which you will have incurred or legally encumbered all of your project expenses. Choose this date carefully when you enter it on your application. We will set your deadline 4 weeks after this date. If you receive an award, the grant period will be provided on the award letter. After you enter your project title and dates, you'll need to give a brief description of your project, along with where and when it will take place. Then the first major question will ask for a description of the sponsoring organization. You'll want to familiarize SDHC with your organization and explain your expertise and capacity to carry out the project. Remember, we may have never heard of your organization, so you'll want to include things like when it was founded, what the mission is, how it is structured, types of programs you do, your staff and clients, things like that. Once you've done this, it's helpful to have someone who knows very little about your organization read it, and then ask them to tell you what your organization does. This is a good way to double check to see if you've been clear in your explanation. Another question is, what is the proposed project? This is your opportunity to sell your idea. It's important to explain precisely what you plan to do with as many details as possible. Be specific. Provide context by explaining how your project fits in with your larger goals. Emphasize how it is unique and why it is important. Be sure to develop a clear work plan. Tell who will be doing what by describing the programming and specific activities you plan to do. Explain how it all contributes to your goals. Define and explain about the scholars and other personnel. Tell who they are and how they will be involved. And develop a timeline. It's important that you have a specific confirmed dates, confirmed scholars, etc. This type of detailed planning can also be a great resource for your organization when it comes time to actually carry out the project. Make sure you confirm your plans with your scholars and other personnel beforehand so they are committed and capable of fulfilling what is being proposed in the application. Explain how your project advances the mission of SDHC and promotes the humanities in American public life. Be careful about simply restating SDHC's mission that is included in our grant guidelines. You need to make sure your explanation connects your particular project to our mission. And you'll want to tell how it will impact South Dakotans specifically, but also how it will make a broader impact. Who is your intended audience? Here you'll describe who you expect to come to your event. This kind of depends on your grant topic. Who is your target audience? Are they teens or adults? Are they school-age children? Do they have a particular education or interest level? Or maybe a particular identity? What culture, ethnicity do you think will be interested? Again, this will all depend on the topic of your project. And you'll need to estimate how many people you think will attend. Who are the humanities scholars involved and what are their credentials? How will they contribute to the proposed activities? Here you'll need to tell who your scholar is, or if you have more than one, who all of them are. Keep in mind, they do not need to be on our scholar list for Speakers Bureau. Your application will be stronger if you can explain that you have a firm commitment from them. Tell the scholar's credentials and provide the basis for confidence that this person or persons are the right choice for this project. You'll need to provide a CV for each scholar, and each one can only be 2 pages long. If you have several scholars, you can scan all of the 2-page CVs into one document and upload that. Will other organizations be involved in the project? Granting organizations like to see collaborative efforts. It is almost a must in today's granting world. So you'll want to identify your partners, describe them, tell why they are working with you, and explain their involvement. And while they are optional, if you wish, you can attach letters of support. The application will allow 2 uploads, and that's a good number. But if you have another one, simply scan all of them into one document and upload that. What specific goals and outcomes relating to humanities programming do you hope to achieve? This is your opportunity to address the needs you are trying to meet, why you think your project is important. Include both long-term solutions as well as incremental ones. You'll want to include broad goals and long-term benefits of the project, but also more specific, measurable objectives or outcomes that help you achieve your goal. For example, you may want to expand understanding of the humanities across the state of South Dakota by inviting 2 to 3 speakers of national prominence to speak about, and then continue with whatever topic fits the project you are planning. Or here's another example. You want to bring the focus on your particular topic by bringing the public together for a festival. We will supply the required SDHC independent and audience evaluation documents, but you may decide to develop your own personal criteria for evaluation as an add-on. The budget. First of all, you need to know what is and isn't allowed. Check our grant guidelines for details about this. Get as close as you can to what you believe your expenses will be, what you will request from SDHC, and what you expect to have as your match. Decide if you want to include overhead costs and know how you will do that. There's also a space on the budget form for you to provide a rationale. Here you see our budget form. The rows are our budget categories, and the columns are the expense designations. This is where you enter the amounts you are requesting from SDHC and what you expect as cash contributions and in-kind donations from your organization or from others. The cash contributions and in-kind together are your match. This total cost share must equal or exceed what you are requesting from SDHC. Not line by line, but overall. What that means is that the total of both of these columns must add up to be a minimum one-to-one match to what you are requesting from SDHC. There's no percentage or criteria split between the cash and the donated. As I noted earlier, organizations generally meet the required match very easily and even greatly exceed it. And it's important that you include as much as is true in both this budget and your final budget, because cost share shows how federal funds are being matched by local community support, and they are a very important requirement for the NEH subawards we make. People sometimes ask me to explain the cash and in-kind contributions. So let's do that. Cash contribution refers to actual money spent for the project, either by the sponsoring organization, other organizations, or individuals. This may include things like salary, travel, purchase and use of office supplies, facilities, equipment rental, anything being paid for but not being paid for by SDHC. In-kind contribution refers to the dollar value of donated services, such as donated scholar time and or travel, volunteer labor, donated meeting space, equipment, or supplies. Anything that is an integral part of your project and that is contributed or discounted for the project. So the categories. How much do you expect to pay your scholars or other critical personnel who are going to be involved? Will there be travel expenses, supplies, printing advertising, postage costs? We do not pay for equipment purchases, but will you be renting a facility or equipment? We can help pay for rental. There's also a space for evaluation. This sometimes throws people, so let me give a little explanation. All grants over $2,000 are required to have an independent third-party evaluator fill out an evaluation form. This is someone who is knowledgeable about the topic, but not directly involved in the planning or presentation of it. Sometimes these people will provide this service as a donation, but you may want to pay them for their service, so you can include that in your budget. Decide if you will include overhead costs, which is shown here as indirect cost or project administration. Not everyone includes it, but you certainly can. SDHC will honor valid federally negotiated indirect cost agreements, which are known as a NICRA, and you will find a good explanation of this in our grant guidelines. If your organization does not have a NICRA, you may elect to include up to 10% of the SDHC subtotal request for project administration. At the bottom, you'll see the space for the budget rationale. We expect you to complete this section too, and you should provide a very detailed explanation of all of the expenses. Your budget should be as accurate as possible. We understand it is a proposed budget and some changes may occur, but do your best to estimate accurately. If you receive the award, be sure to let us know of any changes that may be occurring. Contacts and signatures. There will be a place on the application for names of people to contact and how they will be involved. All of these people should be affiliated with the sponsoring organization. The project director manages the project and is the person I communicate with through the grant period. The fiscal agent is responsible for managing the grant funds and works with the project director to prepare and submit the final financial report. This person cannot be the same person as the project director. The authorizing official signs the application on behalf of the organization. Typically, this is the executive director of the organization, but may be someone else depending on the structure of your group. How are the grants evaluated? A committee of board members reviews the grant applications and makes recommendations to the larger board. They use a rubric to evaluate the applications and also have a meeting to discuss them in detail. There are 4 sections in the rubric, and they each focus on specific questions. Part 1 focuses on how the project leans into the humanities and on specific program components. How it aligns with the SDHC mission, how it addresses a humanities theme or issue, how it expands the public humanities in our state. Part 1 also asks, how unique is the project? Does it include the required public programming? Who is the intended audience, and how will they be impacted? Part 2 focuses on the work plan and how it will be implemented. Is it well planned with an appropriate timeline and management structure? Part 3 focuses on scholars and personnel. Is there at least one humanities scholar actively involved? Does the staff have the capacity to carry out this project? Are there any partnerships? Part 4 focuses on the budget. Is the budget complete and realistic? Does it provide sufficient rationale? Those are the evaluation criteria. Now let's look at some myths and realities of grants and grant making. The first myth is that grants are money for virtually nothing. Grants are actually deals between partners. Once an organization receives a grant, they are responsible for maintaining their end of the bargain and fulfilling the grant requirements. You must honor that contract just like any other contract your business may enter into. The second myth is that writing a grant proposal is an ordeal. It doesn't really have to be, and actually it's quite predictable and simple. Most grant proposals follow virtually the same format, and there are many online resources to help you write one. Like anything, it gets easier with a lot of practice. Another myth is that you just need one good proposal, then use it over and over. Well, the rubber stamp proposal method does not work. Grantors are asking specific questions in a specific order to make the review process easier. You need to tailor each application to both your needs and the mission of the grant-making organization. Another myth is that you need to know someone to get a grant. Actually, you should take the time to build a relationship. Many granting organizations, especially those that are not very large, are easily accessible and can be contacted during the grant writing process for answers. Yet another myth is that grants are inconsistent. Well, grants were never designed to be a regular source of income for an organization. They have a particular time frame and are designated for a particular purpose, so you should never rely on them for all of your funding. And one last myth is that grants are huge, few, and national. Actually, both the myth and the reality here are true. There are many kinds of grants. It just takes time to seek them all out. So in thinking about general tips to get you started, keep these things in mind. Start early. Identify your organizational needs and priorities. Find our SDHC website and check our requirements. Be sure to download our grant guidelines. Use a team approach to develop your plan. Be innovative, be cost effective, be thorough. Use our grant template to organize everything. Gather required documents, begin writing your narratives. Be clear and concise. Remember, grant writing is a competition. Your grant will be evaluated along with many others. Contact us if you have questions. We are available and willing to help you. Then once you have everything organized, go online and submit your application. What happens if you are successful and receive a grant? Well, you'll receive a grant packet in the mail with your award letter, general information, and copies of all required final documents. You'll need to get signatures on the award letter and return a copy of it to us. Be sure to use the contents of the packet as your roadmap during the course of the grant period. And as you go through the process, it's important to keep us informed about any changes in your programming from what you submitted in the application, as well as any budget changes. And be sure to submit your final documents completely and on time. Even earlier than your exact deadline is helpful, so if there are any missing items, we can work through that in time. For financial documentation, we need copies of all SDHC payments, not just invoices or a spreadsheet. We need copies of actual checks, credit card receipts, electronic bank transfers. Following through on all of these important parts for one grant increases your chances of getting another grant in the future. So to close this presentation, thank you for joining us. You'll find contact information here, and remember, you can always reach out to us if you have questions. Okay, so we're back together. Looks like we added a few people during that. Welcome to those of you that missed my introductory comments. My name is Melinda Verdanier, and I am the grants coordinator for the Humanities Council. So I'm hoping and guessing maybe that you have some things that came up and questions that you might have. So I'd like to open it up now for you to have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask a question, see if I can help you. And if you're a little bit uncomfortable with doing that out loud, you can go ahead and write your questions in the chat. Carolyn's helping me to monitor all of that. So I'll give you a minute and see if anybody wants to chime in.
I have a question. I'm looking at getting some funding to bring someone to our campus on Dakota Wesleyan. And but this would be in the fall of 2023, so it's quite a ways away. And this it probably would be an under $2,000. It'd be a submission for $2,000, I think. So it wouldn't be the anyway. So my question is, what should be a good timeline to get, because that wouldn't fall under the stipulation of the ones over 2,000. So what would be a good timeline to get that together to you?
Good question. So it sounds like you said that you're going to have an event in the fall of next year, right?
Right.
Okay. I think I would suggest submitting an application. You could submit one at the February 28th deadline. Even though it's a small request, you can
Right.
still submit it, and it would be evaluated along with all of the other requests at that time. You can also wait until a little bit later, and you could submit it after that date anytime, as long as you get it in, I say 4 to 6 weeks, but I really like the 6 weeks before. It just gives me more time to get it out for review and get everything taken care of if it's awarded. So does that help you?
Yeah, so there's really no benefit. You've got that window from February 28 to 4 to 6 weeks in advance. And so any time in there is good, but is there any benefit to any one period than another?
it's a little hard to say, but I would, it kind of depends on if the board awards all of the money that we have
Right. Yeah.
at that February deadline. Historically, I would say there's generally some money left over. So you're kind of taking a chance that way.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to say for sure because it kind of depends on how generous they feel when they get those applications in February.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Oh, come on, that presentation didn't answer everything, did it?
I have a question, just
Sure.
curious. Typically, how many grant applications do you receive at the minor level and the major level?
It kind of just depends on the year. I would say we might get 10 to 12 to evaluate at one time at the major grant deadlines. And then the other ones just kind of filter in, just as they come in. I don't know if I can give you an exact number, but, that's kind of, I would say of the smaller ones that come in, maybe another 10. It's just a guess. Yeah. Does that help? Okay.
I'll ask again, I'll be brave.
Sure, it's
What
not
do
about
you have-
bravery. It's just go ahead.
Since I don't want to monopolize the time, but at the same time, do you have examples? I know I'm somewhat familiar, with maybe more of the minor grants, like the One Book South Dakota discussions and those kind of things. But do you have examples of grants that have stood out just to get the ball rolling as far as if we're looking at different opportunities, what's been done?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't think we have any available right now. Since I've been here, I don't remember ever having those available for people, but I could certainly check into that and see if that's a possibility. Maybe we have done that in the past. I'll check on that, okay? Are you thinking that you would like to see them on the website? Is that what you're thinking
No,
about?
I may have meant that to be that might have come off a little confusing. I'm just, if there were examples of grants that have been awarded, just so we had kind of an idea of some of the things that the humanities has done.
Yes. Okay. So we do post that on our blog. And I think if you look back through our blog entries, you'll see all of the notifications, like every time after the major grants are done, we give a posting of the listing of all of the name. It tells the name of the organization, how much money they were awarded, there is a little summary of what it is they're going to do. I think that's what you're going for, right? Yeah. Okay. So check and see in the blogs if you can find that. And if you don't, Misty, email me and I will see what I can do to point you in the right direction. Yeah.
I could ask another question if that's okay.
Sure.
The one component that I was a little bit unclear on was the section where the presenter was talking about, collecting receipts and things that are, and making sure you provide good financial track or trail. But in a lot of cases, if you're planning something months down the road, you really haven't spent anything yet. The scholar says, I'll come for $2,000. Okay. And then you got a plane ticket, but you may not have purchased it yet, So I guess in that case, you just produce documentation of all of that and say, this is what we expect to pay for this. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure in some cases you're not going to be able to produce. You can just say, well, the scholar says he's going to come for such and such an amount, but you haven't paid anything yet.
Right. Okay. And by the way, that presenter was me.
Okay.
I did that. Okay. So yes, when you do your proposed budget, you're going to have to estimate, like you're going to have to say, I think that the the airplane expense is going to be $400. So you can just put that in there. You don't need to submit any documentation of that when you're submitting your application. The documentation of payments comes at the very end. So when you first submit your final documents, that's when you'll submit the copies of all of the proof of payment is what I kind of just call it. So I think that answers that question for you, right?
All right, that should, okay. Thanks.
No, that's okay. It's fine. Just ask away. I love these questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If I could just kind of piggyback off of what Melinda said. My name's Carolyn. I work in the office with Melinda. Yeah, so the budget in the beginning is truly just the budget. And you might say, airline tickets right now are roughly $600 to go within the US if you're lucky. So you put that in your budget, and then in the end, maybe the airline ticket was only $400. So then we kind of have to maybe say, okay, well, now I have a little bit extra money to pay for something else. And because we still want you to spend all the money that you were given if possible. But maybe the plane ticket was $800 and we only awarded you $600. If you've got $200 extra in one of the other columns, you can shift that around, but we won't go back and give you more money to cover that extra expense, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then there is a question in the chat, Melinda, from Nancy. Her mic isn't working.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to piggyback off of Carolyn now. So when she said that about shifting money around, you need to talk to me about that.
Oh,
okay.
Yes, I should have said that. You need to talk to Melinda about that before you just send it in.
And we try to keep it within the budget categories, the different rows that were on the budget. So we try to, if the board awards you money in other categories, we can easily shift those. Okay. But if they did not award you money for a particular category, then that's a whole nother thing. So if these things come up, that's where you really just need to talk to me and we'll work through that at the time the best we can. So I'm thinking that might clear up any misconceptions that way, or maybe bring up more questions. We'll see. So, but then Carolyn, go ahead.
The budget always seems to be the scariest part for people, and it's not as bad as it looks, guys. And Melinda will definitely work with you on any of it. So just reach out and ask her. It's better to ask any question. You might think it sounds silly, but it's not. Budgets are the most complicated part of it, but it's not as scary. And we 100% want to work with you on making it work. So, okay. So Nancy is saying her mic isn't working, but her question is, when the application says humanities scholar, is this a person who's registered with the Speakers Bureau, or does this refer to any university professor, etc., who would be considered a humanities scholar?
Yes. Okay. So the scholar does not need to be on our list of Speakers Bureau scholars. That question comes up, and I think it's a good question. So certainly there are plenty of people out there who have the credentials and who would be considered an appropriate scholar for one of our major grants, and they just haven't signed up to be on our Speakers Bureau. So do not feel that you are limited to choosing from the Humanities Scholar Speakers Bureau list. Good question. Thanks, Nancy.
I did post a link in the chat to the last award cycle of grants if anybody's curious and wants to take a look at that. And Nancy is saying now, so if they would be considered an expert in their field, it sounds like that would be considered good to go. Yep, and you just need to get that approved with your application.
Right. So that Carolyn's right. You need to submit the CV, and the board will look at that too. But right, if they are in a humanities field and they have an advanced degree, or if they are someone who can document their experience in the humanities, they probably wouldn't have what an academic person would have as a CV. So what you need to do in that case is just have them provide you with something that's a little bit more than a resume. A resume often is just your work experience and your education, but that person really should include any awards they might have received, anything special or unique about them that makes, them the right person for your grant as the scholar. And thank you, Carolyn, for putting that link in the chat for the blog, I think. You guys got some good questions. I'm not afraid to give wait time, so I know sometimes people need to think a little.
I really appreciate this. This clarifies a lot of things, this whole lake session. I think it's a great idea to do that before you start asking for money. I sort of have a project that falls between the humanities and the arts. And I'm looking at the mission. I'm still trying to figure out whether the staging of this particular thing could qualify for a humanities grant, or if it should go under the arts. I'm collecting stories for a documentary play, and the staging of that play will be sort of kind of what I'm looking for help with. I think I can get funding for the actual creation of that play from elsewhere, but would that be a sort of a project that could, and I'm hoping to collaborate not just with theater, which I think would fall into the arts, but perhaps with communications as well, which would fall into the humanities. It's kind of an interdisciplinary sort of thing. And I was wondering, does that sound like something that's viable if I were going to put that on and then, have community discussion afterwards led by a communications scholar who runs some of the intergroup dialogues here in the local community. And I was wondering if that's something that would, if my request for a grant would go better to the Arts Council, or whether that would be something that the Humanities Council could actually help fund.
Yeah, so there is some gray area. You're right, between the arts and the humanities. They can go together though, and we can find ways to help them go together. You may find that you would want to write a grant to the arts funding for part of it through the arts and then part of it through us. So I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that sometimes people hold, like what you said, a discussion event either before or after an arts performance. And we can certainly help with paying for the scholar who is going to be doing that discussion or, facilitating that discussion. So that's something that you could consider, is writing your grant for that aspect of the event. We could help pay for the stipend for the scholar. We could help pay for their travel if they're coming from, far away, or if they're in state, we can help pay for mileage. We can probably help to pay for facilities rental, for advertising, some other aspects related to it. So, yeah, I think there's ways to do it, Maria. You just have to really be creative, and you have to make a good connection to the humanities for what you're requesting money for. Does that help you?
Yeah, that helps very much, because I think there are going to be some of those kinds of expenses. So yeah, being creative is, yeah. But at least I know that it's worth a try. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's all I want to do is just try. So.
And I think that's exactly right. I think if you have an idea and you're willing to put the time into doing an application, I think it's worth a try, because even if you get turned down, it's a step for the next time. Maybe you can somehow change it for the next time and figure out a way that we can work on together to help you find some funding for maybe not that particular project, but for something else similar in the future. Yeah, good question though.
For you. So if there is a so-called rejection letter, I don't know if that's the right word of choice.
Yeah.
Does the letter usually explain why?
It may, yes. And I think generally we do try to put something in there that gives you an idea, because the board, the program committee and the board as a whole look at all of the grants and provide feedback. So if we can, we will try to give you something that you can use for the future if if you want to try again for that particular topic. Yeah. And it's called a rejection letter, sadly.
I will say too, I think in the rejection letters, I don't, if I remember right, I don't think you spell it out in that letter, but I think if you wanted some more feedback, you could call and see if there was any to give.
Yeah.
So Nancy had another question. She said, apologies if you covered this earlier, kind of a follow-up to Maria's question. Do you only want to see the budget items that we propose the humanities grant would pay for in a given project, or do you want to see an entire budget that might include funding from other sources?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll put in the SDHC column, you'll include the expenses that you would like to request funding help from us for. And then if you have other expenses that you're planning to have, those would come into the cash contribution, because those are going to be the things that you have to pay for anyways. Either you're going to pay for it or some other person is going to pay for it, maybe an individual, or maybe you're getting money from another group to help pay for it as part of your match. You just can't include other federal funding on these grants, okay? So if you're having another federal grant, be careful with including that as a match. I think there's a little something I need to research some more about that, and we can talk about that if that's your particular issue. But yes, so you're going to include all of your expenses from us and from other things that you'll expect to pay out. Anything that's being paid for on the grant but not being paid for us is part of the cash contribution.
And then also in the budget is the in-kind. So, if you're using an event space and, it's part of a library, you're not having to pay for that, whatever fee they would charge somebody is considered the in-kind, and that is part of your budget too. And the in-kind is incredibly important, because every dollar, sorry if you already said this, Melinda, but every dollar the SDHC gives you has to be matched by cash or in-kind.
Yeah.
So if we give you $2,000, your cash and in-kind columns have to equal $2,000 combined.
Right. And it's not like I've seen some applications where some people are misunderstanding and think that if they ask for $500 for scholars from us, they have to have a match of 500 in that scholars row. But that's not true. It's the whole total of your match has to be the match. And I would say overall, organizations have way more match, and often people forget what's included in the match. They, and like Carolyn said, and I know I said it a couple times in the video, that we really want to see that match. It's important to NEH to see that group support of the project. So, really think about everything that's being donated. Really think about anything that's been discounted. If somebody's given you a break on a price, include that in your match, the extra. Maybe you're only going to pay them $500, but they would normally charge $700 or $1,000 to be your speaker. That's their match. That's their donation back to the project. Do we have another question? Okay.
She said, thank you. She gets it, and she understands the in-kind being part of the total.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is great. These are good questions. one final call for questions. Okay. Well, I'm always available. The best way to reach me is by email. So please reach out to me. I really like helping people, and I want you to be able to have a strong application. If you're considering, submitting an application, I want it to be the best you can make it. So Carolyn, looks like she put my email in there in the chat. It's Melinda with an E, Melinda at sdhumanities.org. And yeah, I'll get back to you. We can, like I said, the best way to do it is to email me. If you want to do a phone call, just let me know that in the email and we'll set up a time to do a phone call. Easy to do that. And just as another note, we are going to be posting the presentation on our, and maybe even the Zoom. I'm not exactly how far it's going to go, but the presentation at least will be out there for people to go and see again. I know that you may want to see it again. You may talk to other people and who say, oh gosh, I missed it. Tell them it's out on our website. Go to our grants page. So it's sdhumanities.org/grants.
And on that grants page, you'll find all the guidelines and requirements and an application template that Melinda has put together for you too. So you probably could get most of your questions answered right there on that page. She's done a beautiful job of putting everything together there. So
thanks, Carolyn.
And we will have the presentation Melinda gave up on that website page, like she just said, by tomorrow morning. So just need to get some time to.
Yep. And the deadline is October 15th. Just tell people to go ahead and submit applications. We are ready and excited. It'll be a new fiscal year, November 1st. So we've got our whole pot of money to start with right now. Okay. Well, unless there's anything else, raise your hand or unmute your mic so I can see it rather quickly. Otherwise, I think we will close up the Zoom. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye, everybody.